The rain hammered against the windows of the Hartford Police Department that November morning in 2023. Detective Sarah Mitchell sat at her desk, surrounded by towers of manila folders that seemed to multiply with each passing year. At 52, she had spent 3 decades working cold cases. But there was one file that haunted her dreams more than any other. Case number 61 to 1147. The murder of 17-year-old Catherine Walsh. Sarah pulled the worn folder from her drawer for what must have been the 1,000th time. The black and white photograph of Catherine stared back at her. Dark curls framing an innocent face. A bright smile that would never age beyond that frozen moment in 1961. The girl had been found in Bushnell Park on a frigid December morning, strangled with her own scarf, her school books scattered around her like fallen leaves. 62 years. No arrests. No justice. The case had become Hartford's most infamous unsolved murder. Generations of detectives had tried and failed to crack it. The original investigators were long dead. The witnesses had aged or passed away. The trail had gone cold decades ago. But Sarah refused to let Catherine become just another statistic, another forgotten victim in a dusty file. Her phone buzzed. "Captain Rodriguez, come to my office. Now." Sarah grabbed her coffee and headed down the hallway. Captain Rodriguez stood by his window, his normally stern face unreadable. Next to him stood a woman Sarah had never seen before. Mid-40s, sharp suit, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed federal agent. "This is Agent Patricia Chun from the FBI's Investigative Genealogy Unit," Rodriguez said. "She has news about the Walsh case." Sarah's heart stopped. After all these years, Agent Chun opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick report. "Detective Mitchell, we've been using new DNA technology to reprocess evidence from unsolved cases. 3 months ago, we extracted a viable DNA profile from epithelial cells found under Catherine Walsh's fingernails. She fought her attacker. We ran it through genealogical databases, built family trees, and worked backwards through generations." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the report. "Who is it?" Agent Chen's expression darkened. "That's where this gets complicated. The DNA belongs to Thomas Brennan." The name meant nothing to Sarah. She flipped through the pages, scanning the genealogical charts and DNA markers. "Who's Thomas Brennan?" He was 19 in 1961. Lived 3 blocks from Catherine Walsh. No criminal record. Joined the Army in 1962. Served in Vietnam, came home, got married, had kids. Became a pillar of the community. Sarah looked up sharply. Became? Past tense? He's still alive. 81 years old. Lives in West Hartford with his wife of 58 years, Margaret. They have 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. He coached Little League for 30 years. Volunteers at the church. Everyone in his neighborhood calls him Uncle Tommy. The room spun. Sarah sat down heavily. "You're telling me this man has been walking around free for 62 years? Living a normal life? While Catherine Walsh's family spent 6 decades wondering who killed their daughter." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. "There's more. His youngest son is Connecticut State Senator James Brennan. His daughter is Judge Linda Brennan Foster, presiding over the Superior Court in New Haven. His oldest son, Michael, is a retired Hartford police lieutenant." Sarah felt sick. A cop's father. A senator's father. A judge's father. Agent Chun continued. "We've triple-checked everything. The DNA is a definitive match. We found old yearbooks showing Thomas and Catherine went to the same high school. Bulkeley High School, class of 1961. We interviewed elderly former classmates. Several remember that Thomas had asked Catherine to the winter formal and she turned him down. 2 weeks later, she was dead." Sarah stood, pacing the small office. Her mind raced through the implications. "When do we bring him in?" Captain Rodriguez and Agent Chun exchanged glances. "That's why you're here, Sarah. This arrest is going to create a media firestorm. The Brennan family is deeply connected. But more importantly, you've dedicated your career to Catherine Walsh. You deserve to be the one to close this case." "Tomorrow morning," Agent Chin said. 6 a.m. We go to his house before the news breaks. Federal agents and Hartford PD, Together. We do this by the book. No mistakes. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She read through the Walsh file again, but this time with new eyes. The original detectives had interviewed dozens of people, including Thomas Brennan. His alibi had been simple. He was home with his parents. His parents had confirmed it. The detectives had noted he seemed nervous. But what teenager wouldn't be nervous talking to police about a murdered classmate? They had let him go, and he had gotten away with murder for 62 years. Sarah pulled out her phone and looked up Thomas Brennan on social media. His grandson had posted photos from a family barbecue last summer. There he was, Uncle Tommy, gray-haired and smiling, surrounded by children and grandchildren, wearing a World War II veteran's cap, cutting a birthday cake, looking like everybody's favorite grandfather. She thought about Catherine Walsh's family. Her parents had died in the 1990s, never knowing justice. But Catherine had a younger brother, Robert, now 79 years old, living in a nursing home in Manchester. He had been 15 when his sister was murdered. Sarah had visited him twice over the years. The pain in his eyes had never faded. Tomorrow, she would finally be able to tell him they had caught Catherine's killer. Sarah arrived at the station at 4:30 a.m. The tactical team was already assembling. Agent Chun reviewed the arrest plan one final time. They would have 12 officers, 4 federal agents and 2 detectives. They expected no violence, given Thomas Brennan's age and lack of criminal history, but they were taking no chances. The convoy rolled out at 5:45. The streets of West Hartford were quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah's heart pounded as they turned onto Oakwood Avenue, a tree-lined street of well-maintained colonials and manicured lawns. The American dream, built on a lie. The Brennan house was a pale yellow colonial with white shutters. A porch swing swayed gently in the November wind. A welcome mat that said blessed. Christmas decorations were already going up, twinkling lights outlining the doorframe. Sarah stepped out of the vehicle, her badge hanging around her neck. The tactical team took positions around the house. Agent Chun stood beside her as they approached the front door. "This is it," Chun whispered. 62 years of lies end right here." Sarah rang the doorbell. Once, twice. She heard movement inside. A light came on. The door opened a crack, chain still attached. An elderly man peered out, squinting without his glasses. His white hair stood up in disarray. He wore old pajamas and looked confused and frightened. "Can I help you? Thomas Michael Brennan?" Sarah's voice was steady, professional. "Yes? What's going on? Is everything okay?" "I'm Detective Sarah Mitchell with the Hartford Police Department. This is Agent Patricia Chun with the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest." The old man's face went pale. His hand gripped the doorframe. "What? There must be some mistake. I haven't done anything." "The arrest is for the murder of Catherine Walsh on December 8, 1961. For a moment, Thomas Brennan stood frozen. Then something shifted in his eyes. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition, and fear. The kind of fear that comes from a secret you've carried for 62 years finally catching up to you. His wife's voice called from upstairs. "Tommy? Who's at the door?" He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, tears streamed down his weathered cheeks. "I knew this day would come," he whispered. "I've been waiting for it my whole life." Thomas Brennan removed the chain and opened the door fully. His hands shook as Agent Chun read him his Miranda rights. Sarah watched his face carefully, searching for remorse, for humanity, for anything that might explain how a man could live with such a secret for over 6 decades. Margaret Brennan appeared at the top of the stairs, pulling her bathrobe tight. Her scream pierced the quiet morning. "Tommy, what's happening? Get away from my husband." She rushed down the stairs, but an officer gently intercepted her. "Ma'am, please stay back. This is insane." Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. "He hasn't done anything. We've been married 58 years. I know my husband." But the look on Thomas Brennan's face told a different story. He didn't protest. He didn't demand a lawyer. He simply stood there, tears rolling down his cheeks, staring at the floor as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Mrs. Brennan," Sarah said quietly, Your husband is being arrested in connection with a murder that occurred in 1961. You need to call your family. Murder? Margaret's legs buckled. An officer caught her and guided her to the couch. This is crazy. Tommy, tell them. Tell them this is all a mistake. Thomas finally looked at his wife. His voice cracked. Call Jimmy. Call the kids. Tell them I'm sorry. The word sorry hung in the air like a confession. Margaret's face transformed from shock to horror to something Sarah had seen too many times in her career. The awful realization that the person you loved most in the world was a stranger. No, no, Tommy, no. What did you do? But Thomas had already turned away, allowing the officers to lead him to the waiting patrol car. Neighbors were emerging onto their porches, drawn by the flashing lights and commotion. Sarah saw their faces shift from curiosity to disbelief as they recognized Uncle Tommy being put into the back of a police car. The drive to the station was silent. Thomas stared out the window at the passing streets of Hartford, seeing them perhaps for the last time as a free man. Sarah sat in the front passenger seat, her mind already preparing for the interrogation ahead. At the station, they processed him through booking. Fingerprints, photographs, the routine humiliation of being reduced to a number, a case file, a suspect. His hands trembled so badly the technician had to help him with the fingerprint scanner. By 8 a.m., the news had broken. Sarah's phone exploded with notifications. Every news outlet in Connecticut was running the story. Hartford police arrest 81-year-old man in 1961 cold case murder. Prominent family rocked by grandfather's arrest. DNA solves 62-year-old killing. In the interrogation room, Thomas sat hunched over the metal table. Sarah and Agent Chun entered with thick folders and a laptop. Sarah set down a photograph of Catherine Walsh, her high school portrait, bright and smiling. Tell me about Catherine, Sarah said. Thomas stared at the photo for a long moment. She was beautiful, smart. Everyone liked her. She was going to go to college, become a teacher. She had her whole life ahead of her. And you took it from her. Thomas's jaw clenched. His eyes filled with tears again. I didn't mean to. You have to understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Agent Chun leaned forward. Then tell us what happened. You've carried this for 62 years. Don't you want to finally tell the truth? Thomas took a shaky breath. I asked her to the winter formal. We'd been friends since freshman year. I thought maybe she liked me too. But she said no. She said she was going with Danny Morrison. I was humiliated. All my friends knew I was going to ask her. They laughed at me. Sarah kept her voice neutral. So you killed her because she rejected you? No, it wasn't like that. Thomas rubbed his face with his cuffed hands. I just wanted to talk to her. I followed her after school on December 8th. She was walking through Bushnell Park, taking the shortcut home like she always did. I caught up to her by the pond. I asked her why she said no. If there was something wrong with me. What did she say? She was kind about it. That made it worse somehow. She said I was a nice guy, but she just didn't have those feelings for me. She started to walk away. And I grabbed her arm. I told her she had to give me a chance. She pulled away. We struggled. Her scarf, it was wrapped around her neck. I grabbed it. I pulled. I just wanted her to stop, to listen, to understand. His voice dropped to a whisper. She fell. Her books went everywhere. I kept pulling the scarf tighter. Her hands clawed at my face, my arms. And then she stopped moving. I let go. She just lay there in the snow, so still. I ran. The room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Sarah felt rage boiling in her chest, but she kept her face impassive. You strangled a 17-year-old girl to death because she wouldn't go to a dance with you. I was 19. I was stupid. I was angry. Thomas looked up, his eyes desperate. I've regretted it every single day of my life. Every single day. I joined the army hoping I'd die in Vietnam. When I came home, I tried to be a good man. I tried to make up for it. I volunteered. I coached kids. I went to church. I thought if I could just do enough good, maybe it would balance out the evil I did. Sarah slammed her hand on the table. You don't get to balance out murder. Catherine Walsh never got to go to college. Never got to become a teacher. Never got to fall in love, get married, have children. You stole everything from her. And then you went home, lived your life, built a family, and acted like it never happened. I never forgot her. Thomas's voice broke. Every Christmas. Every December 8th. I think about her. I'd see her face. I'd remember what I did. Agent Chun pulled out another folder. Let's talk about your alibi. You told police you were home with your parents that night. I lied. They lied for me. My mother saw blood on my jacket when I came home. She saw the scratches on my face and arms. I broke down and told her everything. She and my father made me swear to never speak of it again. They cleaned my clothes. They told police I'd been home all evening. They protected me. Sarah's disgust deepened. Your parents helped you get away with murder. They were trying to protect their son. Thomas looked broken. My father died in 1975. Cancer. On his deathbed, he made me promise to be a good man, to honor Catherine's memory by living a decent life. My mother died in 1989. Alzheimer's. In her final days, she kept calling me by Catherine's name. She'd look at me and scream. The guilt destroyed her mind. Outside the interrogation room, the station was in chaos. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who walked past. Sarah could see them through the window, a feeding frenzy of cameras and microphones. Captain Rodriguez knocked and entered. Senator Brennan is here with 3 lawyers. Judge Brennan Foster is on her way. Lieutenant Brennan retired 10 years ago, but he's called in every favor he has. The pressure is already starting. Sarah stood. I don't care who his kids are. He confessed. We have DNA. We have his statement. This case is closed. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The DA is reviewing everything now. They want to charge him with first-degree murder. But Sarah, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. The Brennan family has power and money. They're going to fight. Let them fight. Sarah looked back at Thomas through the two-way mirror. Catherine Walsh's family waited 62 years for justice. I'm not letting him slip away now. By noon, Thomas Brennan had been formally charged with murder in the first degree. His arraignment was scheduled for the following morning. As officers led him to a holding cell, he shuffled like the old man he was, the weight of his secret finally visible on his shoulders. Sarah walked out of the station into a wall of cameras and shouting reporters. Detective Mitchell, how do you feel about arresting an 81-year-old grandfather? Do you think he's a threat to society? What about his family? His war service? Sarah stopped and faced the cameras. Catherine Walsh was 17 years old when Thomas Brennan strangled her to death and left her body in the snow. For 62 years, her family lived without answers. Today, they have justice. That's all I have to say. She pushed through the crowd and got into her car. Her phone rang. The nursing home in Manchester. Robert Walsh wanted to see her. The Manchester Meadows nursing home smelled of antiseptic and cafeteria food. Sarah walked down the long corridor, past wheelchairs and walkers, past residents watching television in the common room. She carried the case file under her arm like a sacred text. Robert Walsh sat in his room by the window, staring out at the gray November sky. At 79, he was frail, his hands spotted with age, his eyes clouded with cataracts. But when he turned and saw Sarah, something sharp and alert flickered in his gaze. You found him, he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah sat down beside him and opened the file. She placed Catherine's photograph on the table between them. We found him, Mr. Walsh. His name is Thomas Brennan. He's been arrested. He confessed. Robert's weathered hands reached for the photo, trembling as they touched his sister's face. 62 years. His voice cracked. My parents died not knowing. My mother went to her grave thinking Catherine's killer was still out there, still free. I'm so sorry it took this long. Robert wiped his eyes. Who is he? This Thomas Brennan? Sarah explained everything. The DNA match, the genealogical investigation, the confession, Thomas Brennan's life of deception, his prominent family, his decades of living as a respected community member while Catherine lay in her grave. Robert listened in silence. When Sarah finished, he asked quietly, Why did he do it? She rejected him. He asked her to a dance and she said no. So he killed her. The old man's face contorted with rage and grief. 62 years my sister has been gone. 62 years. And it was because some boy couldn't handle being told no? Sarah reached across and took his hand. He's going to pay for it, Mr. Walsh. I promise you. Robert looked at her with fierce intensity. Make sure he does. Don't let his fancy family get him off. Don't let some judge feel sorry for him because he's old. My sister never got to be old. She never got to be anything. I won't let that happen. Robert pulled out a small box from his bedside table. Inside was a stack of letters, yellowed with age, tied with a faded ribbon. These are letters Catherine wrote to me the year before she died. She was my big sister. She looked after me. In every letter, she talked about her dreams. College, teaching, maybe traveling to Europe someday. She wanted to make a difference in the world. He handed one to Sarah. She unfolded it carefully. The girlish handwriting leaped off the page. Dear Bobby, guess what? I got accepted to Central Connecticut State. I'm going to be a teacher, just like I always wanted. Mom and Dad are so proud. I can't wait to have my own classroom someday. Sarah's throat tightened. She'll never be forgotten, Mr. Walsh. I promise you that. Back at the station, the media circus had intensified. Sarah pushed through the crowd of reporters camped outside, ignoring their shouted questions. Inside, Captain Rodriguez was in a heated discussion with the district attorney, Marcus Webb. Webb looked up as Sarah entered. Detective Mitchell, we need to talk about the charges. Sarah's guard went up immediately. What about them? Webb sighed. The Brennan family has hired Gerald Hartwick, best criminal defense attorney in New England. He's already filed motions arguing that Thomas Brennan is too old and frail to stand trial. They're pushing for a medical evaluation, claiming dementia, claiming he doesn't understand the charges. He understood them perfectly well when he confessed. Hartwick will argue the confession was coerced, that you took advantage of an elderly man without his attorney present. He waived his rights. Agent Chun can confirm. Everything was by the book. Webb held up his hands. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm saying we need to be prepared. This case is going to be a battle. The Brennan family is already working the media. They're painting him as a confused old man, a war hero, a beloved grandfather who couldn't possibly have done this. Sarah's anger flared. We have DNA evidence. We have his confession. We have motive and opportunity. What more do you need? I need you to understand what we're up against. Webb's voice was firm. Senator Brennan has connections all the way to the governor's office. Judge Brennan Foster has colleagues on the bench who might be sympathetic. And Lieutenant Brennan knows every cop in this state. They're going to use every resource they have to protect their father. Then we fight harder. Sarah leaned forward. Catherine Walsh deserves justice. Robert Walsh deserves closure. I don't care how powerful the Brennan family is. Webb nodded slowly. Good, because that's exactly what I needed to hear. We're going full prosecution. First-degree murder. No plea deals. No mercy. If you've been following this story, if you believe justice should be served no matter how long it takes, stay with us. This case is about to take turns nobody expected. The fight for Catherine Walsh has only just begun. The arraignment the next morning was a media spectacle. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and members of both families. Sarah sat in the front row of the gallery, watching as Thomas Brennan was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit. He looked even older than he had the day before. His shoulders slumped. His eyes were red from crying. His family sat behind the defense table. Senator James Brennan, stone-faced in an expensive suit. Judge Linda Brennan Foster, trying to maintain composure. Michael Brennan, the retired police lieutenant, glaring at Sarah with open hostility. Margaret Brennan sat between her children, sobbing quietly into a handkerchief. The grandchildren were conspicuously absent, likely shielded from the cameras and shame. All rise. Judge Patricia Simmons entered, her expression severe. She was known as a no-nonsense judge who ran her courtroom with an iron fist. The charges were read. Murder in the first degree. Thomas Brennan stood silently as his attorney, Gerald Hartwick, a silver-haired man in a $3,000 suit, entered a plea of not guilty. Your Honor, Hartwick began, his voice smooth and practiced. My client is an 81-year-old man with no criminal history. He's a decorated Vietnam veteran, a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. He's lived in this community for over 60 years without incident. We request he be released on bail pending trial. District Attorney Webb stood. Your Honor, the defendant has confessed to strangling a 17-year-old girl to death in 1961 and evading justice for over 6 decades. He's proven himself capable of living with a lie for his entire adult life. He's a flight risk and should be held without bail. Judge Simmons looked at Thomas Brennan over her reading glasses. Mr. Brennan, do you have anything to say? Thomas stood slowly, his chains rattling. His voice was barely audible. I just want to say I'm sorry. To Catherine's family. To my family. To everyone I hurt. I know sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. Judge Simmons was unmoved. Bail is denied. Trial date is set for March 15, 2024. The defendant will remain in custody at Hartford Correctional Center. The gavel struck. Margaret Brennan wailed. The Brennan children looked shell-shocked. Sarah felt no satisfaction, only a grim determination to see this through to the end. Outside the courthouse, Robert Walsh sat in a wheelchair, bundled against the cold. Sarah had arranged for him to attend the arraignment. Tears streamed down his weathered face as he watched Thomas Brennan being led away in chains. She would have been 80 this year, he said quietly. My sister. Can you imagine? 80 years old. Maybe great-grandchildren of her own. All the lives she could have touched as a teacher. All the children she could have inspired. Gone. Because of him. Sarah knelt beside the wheelchair. We're going to make sure he pays for every day she lost. That evening, Sarah returned to the police station to find her desk covered in messages. Some were supportive, thanking her for her dedication. Others were vicious, accusing her of persecuting an old man, of destroying a respected family, of grandstanding for publicity. One email caught her attention. It was from a woman named Patricia Morrison, daughter of Danny Morrison, the boy Catherine had planned to attend the winter formal with. Detective Mitchell, I want to thank you for solving Catherine's murder. My father is 80 years old now, but he's never forgotten her. They were just kids with a crush planning to go to a dance together. After she died, he blamed himself. He wondered if somehow his invitation had put her in danger. He dropped out of school, struggled with depression for years. Your arrest has given him closure he never thought he'd find. Thank you for not giving up on Catherine. Sarah printed the email and added it to her case file. Another life damaged by Thomas Brennan's violence. Another victim who'd carried the weight of that December night for over 6 decades. Her phone rang. Agent Chen. Sarah, you need to see this. Turn on Channel 8. Sarah pulled up the news stream on her computer. Senator James Brennan stood at a podium, cameras flashing. My father is innocent. This DNA evidence is circumstantial. The confession was coerced from an elderly man suffering from cognitive decline. We will prove his innocence in court. Sarah's jaw clenched. The battle lines were being drawn. The months leading to trial were brutal. The Brennan family launched a full media campaign, painting Thomas as a victim of overzealous prosecution. They hired expert witnesses who claimed the DNA evidence could have been contaminated. They found a neurologist willing to testify that Thomas showed signs of dementia. They dug into Sarah's career, looking for any case she'd mishandled, any mistake they could exploit. Sarah worked 18-hour days, building an airtight case. She and Agent Chun tracked down former Bulkeley High School students, now in their 80s, who remembered Thomas's obsession with Catherine. They found Catherine's best friend, Ruth, living in Florida. Ruth was 81, her memory still sharp. Tommy Brennan gave me the creeps, Ruth said over video call. He followed Catherine everywhere. After she said no to the dance, he got angry. I heard him tell his friends that Catherine thought she was too good for him, that she needed to be taught a lesson. I told the police this in 1961, but they didn't take it seriously. Sarah felt vindicated but also furious. The original investigators had dismissed crucial testimony because Thomas came from a good family, because he seemed like a nice boy, because Catherine was just a girl who'd probably led him on. The prosecution team also discovered Thomas's military records. Contrary to the hero narrative his family promoted, he'd been disciplined twice for aggressive behavior toward Vietnamese civilians. He'd been evaluated by an army psychiatrist who noted violent tendencies and difficulty controlling anger. By February 2024, the case was solid. District Attorney Webb was confident. We have DNA, confession, motive, pattern of behavior, and eyewitness testimony about his state of mind. The jury will convict. But Gerald Hartwick was equally prepared. He filed motion after motion, trying to suppress the confession, exclude the DNA evidence, delay the trial. Each motion was denied, but they served their purpose. Keeping the Brennan family in the news, maintaining the narrative of a persecuted old man. The trial began on a cold March morning. The courthouse was packed. Every major news network had reporters present. Sarah sat behind the prosecution table, her stomach churning with anxiety and anticipation. Jury selection took 3 days. Hartwick challenged anyone who seemed too sympathetic to cold cases or victims' rights. Webb challenged anyone who seemed swayed by the Brennan family's status. Finally, they had 12 jurors. 6 men, 6 women, ranging in age from 28 to 67. In his opening statement, Webb was powerful and direct. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a young woman named Catherine Walsh who had her entire life stolen from her on December 8, 1961. The evidence will show that Thomas Brennan, angry over rejection, strangled her to death and then spent 62 years lying about it. DNA doesn't lie. Science doesn't lie. And when you hear his own confession, you'll know the truth. Hartwick's opening was equally compelling. This case is about a rush to judgment, about prosecutors desperate to close an old case, willing to railroad an elderly man based on questionable science and a coerced confession. Thomas Brennan is a decorated veteran, a devoted family man, and a pillar of his community. The prosecution wants you to believe he's been living a lie for 62 years. But the real lie is this entire case. The prosecution's case took 2 weeks. Agent Chun testified about the DNA analysis, explaining in meticulous detail how epithelial cells under Catherine's fingernails matched Thomas Brennan's genetic profile. The defense tried to poke holes, suggesting contamination, but Chun was unshakable. Webb played the video of Thomas's confession. The jury watched in silence as the old man described grabbing Catherine's scarf, pulling it tight, watching her struggle and fall. Several jurors looked physically ill. Ruth testified via video link from Florida, describing Thomas's obsession and his threatening comments after Catherine's rejection. "I wish I'd done more," she said, crying. "I wish I'd warned Catherine to stay away from him." Danny Morrison, now 81 and using a walker, took the stand. His voice shook as he described learning about Catherine's death. "We were supposed to go to the winter formal together. I bought a corsage. After she died, I kept that corsage in my freezer for 20 years. Couldn't let it go. Couldn't let her go." The most powerful testimony came from Robert Walsh. At 79, he looked fragile, but his voice was strong. "My sister was my hero. She helped me with homework. She defended me from bullies. She was going to change the world." And Thomas Brennan took all of that away because his ego couldn't handle being told no. He didn't just kill Catherine. He killed everything she would have become, every child she would have taught, every life she would have touched. By the time the prosecution rested, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted. The jury looked at Thomas Brennan not as a confused old man, but as what he was, a murderer who'd evaded justice for decades. The defense case was shorter. Hartwick called the neurologist who testified about potential cognitive decline. Webb destroyed him on cross-examination, showing that Thomas had passed every competency evaluation and had displayed perfect memory when discussing his military service and family history. Hartwick called character witnesses. Thomas's children testified about what a wonderful father he'd been. His former Little League players talked about how he'd mentored them. His pastor praised his devotion to the church. Webb's cross-examination was surgical. To Senator Brennan, did your father ever tell you he murdered a girl in 1961? To Judge Brennan Foster, did you know your father lied to police and got away with strangling a 17-year-old? To Michael Brennan, as a police lieutenant, what would you have done if you'd known your father was a murderer? None of them had answers. The defense's biggest gamble was putting Thomas on the stand. Hartwick clearly hoped the jury would see a frail old man and feel sympathy. It backfired spectacularly. Webb's cross-examination was devastating. Mr. Brennan, you lived 3 blocks from Catherine Walsh. You saw her family grieving. You saw the missing person posters, the vigils, the newspaper articles about the unsolved murder. And you said nothing. I was scared. Thomas whispered. You were scared? Webb's voice rose. Catherine Walsh was terrified when you strangled her. She clawed at your face trying to breathe. And you were scared? I made a mistake. I was young. You were 19. Old enough to know that murder is wrong. You joined the army. You got married. You had children. You coached Little League. You volunteered at church. And every single day you knew you were a murderer. You knew Catherine's family was suffering. And you chose yourself over the truth. Thomas broke down sobbing on the stand. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead, Mr. Brennan. Webb turned to the jury. For 62 years, this man chose comfort over conscience. He built a life on a lie. He let Catherine's family suffer while he played the role of a good man. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A choice he made every single day. Closing arguments were powerful on both sides. Hartwick pleaded for mercy, asking the jury to consider Thomas's age, his service, his family. Webb reminded them that justice delayed is still justice, that Catherine deserved their verdict no matter how much time had passed. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Sarah paced the hallway outside the courtroom, unable to sit still. Agent Chun brought her coffee she couldn't drink. Captain Rodriguez tried to reassure her, but she could see the tension in his face too. When the bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict, Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Everyone filed back into the courtroom. Thomas Brennan was led in, his face ashen. His family held hands, bracing for the worst. The jury foreman stood. A woman in her 50s, a high school teacher. We find the defendant, Thomas Michael Brennan, guilty of murder in the 1st degree. Margaret Brennan's scream echoed through the courtroom. The Brennan children sat in stunned silence. Robert Walsh, watching from his wheelchair, closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Kathy. Thank you." Thomas Brennan showed no reaction. He simply stared at his hands, the same hands that had strangled Catherine Walsh 63 years ago. Judge Simmons set sentencing for 2 weeks later. The courtroom erupted as reporters rushed out to break the news. Sarah stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Agent Chun hugged her. We did it. We got justice for Catherine. Outside, Sarah faced the cameras one final time. Today, a jury of 12 citizens looked at the evidence and delivered justice for Catherine Walsh. No matter how much time passes, no matter how powerful someone becomes, the truth will find its way to light. Catherine's family can finally have peace. That night, Sarah visited Catherine's grave for the first time since the arrest. Spring flowers were beginning to bloom around the headstone. Someone had left fresh roses, probably Robert. Sarah knelt in the grass. We got him, Catherine. After 62 years, we got him. You can rest now. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. Justice had finally come to Hartford. The 2 weeks between verdict and sentencing felt like an eternity. The media frenzy reached its peak. National news outlets picked up the story. Documentaries were already in production. Catherine Walsh's name, forgotten for decades, was suddenly on everyone's lips. Sarah spent those weeks preparing her victim impact statement. She'd spoken with Robert Walsh daily, helping him craft his own words for the court. The old man's health had deteriorated since the trial. The stress and emotion had taken their toll. But he was determined to be present for sentencing. The Brennan family, meanwhile, was in crisis. Senator James Brennan announced he wouldn't seek re-election. Judge Linda Brennan Foster took a leave of absence from the bench. Michael Brennan gave interviews defending his father, but his voice lacked conviction. The family that had once been Hartford's elite was now synonymous with deception and murder. Margaret Brennan filed for divorce. After 58 years of marriage, she couldn't reconcile the man she'd loved with the monster he'd been revealed to be. In a statement released through her attorney, she said, "I thought I knew my husband. I was wrong. My heart breaks for Catherine Walsh and her family. I will spend the rest of my life wondering how I could have been so blind." On the morning of April 3, 2024, the courthouse was once again packed. Thomas Brennan was led in wearing the same orange jumpsuit. He'd lost weight. His face was gaunt. He looked like a man already serving a life sentence. Judge Simmons entered, her expression grave. "Before I pronounce sentence, I'll hear from the victim's family and the defendant." Robert Walsh was wheeled to the front of the courtroom. His hands trembled as he held his prepared statement. "For 62 years, I've lived with a hole in my heart where my sister should be. Catherine was supposed to be at my high school graduation. She was supposed to meet my wife, know my children, watch them grow. Every milestone of my life was marked by her absence." His voice grew stronger. "Thomas Brennan stole my sister from me. He stole her from our parents, who died without knowing who killed their daughter. He stole her from every student she would have taught, every life she would have touched. And then he had the audacity to live a full life, to have everything Catherine was denied. Marriage, children, grandchildren, respect. He coached Little League while my sister's bones lay cold in the ground." Robert looked directly at Thomas. "You don't deserve mercy. You don't deserve sympathy. You deserve every single day of punishment this court can give you. My only regret is that you got to live free for 62 years while Catherine got nothing." The courtroom was silent. Thomas wept openly, his shoulders shaking. Judge Simmons looked at the defense table. "Does the defendant wish to speak?" Hartwick stood. "Your Honor, my client wishes to address the court." Thomas struggled to his feet. His voice was barely audible. "I know nothing I say can undo what I did. I know sorry means nothing after 62 years. But I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry to Catherine's family. I'm sorry to my own family for the shame I've brought them. I'm sorry to this community for betraying their trust." He paused, gathering himself. "I've thought about that night every day of my life. I've seen Catherine's face in my dreams. I've heard her struggling to breathe. I felt the weight of what I did crushing me. But I was too much of a coward to confess. I chose myself over justice. I chose comfort over conscience." Thomas looked at Robert Walsh. "Your sister deserved so much better. She deserved to live. She deserved justice. And you deserved answers. I can't give Catherine back her life. But I can give you the truth. Killed her. I strangled her because my pride was hurt, because I couldn't accept rejection, because I was selfish and violent and cruel. That's the truth. That's what I am." He sat down heavily. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Simmons opened her sentencing file. "Thomas Michael Brennan, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of murder in the first degree. This court has reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the circumstances of this case. What you did on December 8, 1961, was an act of inexcusable violence. You took a young woman's life because she exercised her right to say no to you." The judge's voice grew harder. "But your crime didn't end that night. For 62 years, you compounded that evil with deception. You lied to police. You allowed your parents to lie for you. You watched Catherine's family suffer and said nothing. You built a life, a reputation, a family, all on the foundation of murder and lies." Judge Simmons looked directly at Thomas. "Some might argue that you're too old for prison, that you've lived a good life since then, that you've contributed to society. But Catherine Walsh never got the chance to contribute. She never got to be old. She never got to live at all. Justice doesn't have an expiration date." The courtroom held its breath. "I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will spend whatever time you have remaining behind bars. That is the court's judgment." The gavel struck. Margaret Brennan stood and walked out without looking back. The Brennan children sat frozen. Robert Walsh closed his eyes and whispered something that looked like a prayer. Thomas Brennan was led away in chains. As he passed Sarah, he stopped. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not letting me get away with it." Sarah felt no sympathy. "You shouldn't thank me for doing my job. You should have confessed 62 years ago." Outside the courthouse, Sarah stood with Robert Walsh, facing the assembled media. Today, justice was served. Catherine Walsh can finally rest in peace. Her family can finally have closure. This case shows that no matter how much time passes, the truth will prevail. Evil doesn't get to win just because it hides well. Robert spoke, his voice clear despite his frailty. "My sister was 17 years old when she died. She never got to experience so much of what makes life beautiful. But her memory has been honored today. Thomas Brennan will spend his remaining days in prison, and that is exactly where he belongs." The reporters shouted questions. "Do you forgive him? Do you feel closure? Was justice truly served after 62 years? Robert was firm. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give. Only Catherine could forgive him, and he took away her voice. As for closure, yes. Knowing who killed my sister, seeing him held accountable, that's something I never thought I'd experience. It won't bring Catherine back, but it honors her memory." Back at the station, Captain Rodriguez met Sarah with rare emotion in his eyes. "You did it. You closed the impossible case." Sarah shook her head. "We did it. All of us. Agent Chun, the DA's office, the jury, everyone who refused to let Catherine be forgotten." Rodriguez handed her an envelope. "This came for you." Inside was a letter from Patricia Morrison, Danny Morrison's daughter. "Detective Mitchell, my father passed away last night. He'd been in hospice for weeks, holding on. Yesterday, when he heard the verdict, he smiled for the first time in months. He said, 'She got justice. Kathy got justice.' Then he let go. Thank you for giving him peace before he died." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Another life marked by that terrible December night. Another person who'd carried the weight of Catherine's murder for over 60 years. At least Danny Morrison had died knowing the truth. That evening, Sarah returned to Catherine's grave one final time. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cemetery. Fresh flowers covered the headstone now, tributes from strangers who'd followed the case, who'd been moved by Catherine's story. Sarah placed her own bouquet of white roses and knelt in the grass. "It's over, Catherine. He's been sentenced. Life in prison. He'll never hurt anyone again. Your family has answers. Your memory has been honored. You can rest now." A gentle breeze stirred the flowers. Sarah stayed there until the sun set, feeling the weight of 3 decades of cold cases, of victims like Catherine who deserved justice, of families who deserved answers. When she finally stood to leave, she noticed an elderly man standing nearby at another grave. He looked familiar. She approached slowly. The man turned. "Detective Mitchell? I'm Walter Morrison, Danny's brother. I came to tell Catherine that Danny never forgot her, that he loved her all his life, that he's with her now." Sarah's throat tightened. "They were just kids." Walter nodded. "They were. But Thomas Brennan stole their chance to be anything more. He stole so much from so many people. I'm grateful he'll finally pay for it." They stood together in the fading light, 2 strangers united by a 63-year-old tragedy that had finally found its resolution. In the distance, the lights of Hartford began to glow against the darkening sky. Justice had come to Hartford. Late but certain, Catherine Walsh's story would not be forgotten. Her name would not fade into history as just another cold case. She had been seen. She had been heard. She had been avenged. And Thomas Brennan would spend his final days remembering exactly what he'd taken, exactly what he'd done, exactly what he'd lost by choosing violence over humanity. 3 years later, April 2027. The Hartford Police Department conference room was filled with journalism students from the University of Connecticut. Sarah Mitchell, now 55 and promoted to lieutenant of the Cold Case Division, stood at the front, a PowerPoint presentation behind her displaying Catherine Walsh's smiling high school portrait. "This case changed everything about how we approach cold cases," Sarah explained to the attentive students. The Catherine Walsh investigation showed us that justice doesn't have a statute of limitations. That families deserve answers no matter how much time has passed. And that new technology can breathe life into cases everyone else had given up on. A young woman raised her hand. "Lieutenant Mitchell, what happened to Thomas Brennan?" Sarah's expression was measured. "Thomas Brennan died in prison 14 months ago. Heart attack. He was 83 years old. He'd served 2 years and 7 months of his life sentence." The room murmured. Some students looked disappointed that he hadn't served longer. Others seemed satisfied that he'd at least died behind bars. Did he ever express real remorse? Another student asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. His attorney said he spent his time in prison writing letters to Catherine's family. Robert Walsh received over 200 letters. He never opened a single one. He donated them unopened to the case archives. Remorse is complicated. Thomas Brennan was sorry. But sorry doesn't resurrect the dead. Sorry doesn't give back 62 stolen years. She clicked to the next slide, showing Robert Walsh at the trial. Robert Walsh passed away 6 months after Thomas Brennan's sentencing. He was 79 years old. But before he died, he told me that knowing the truth, seeing justice served, gave him peace he'd never thought possible. He said he could finally let Catherine rest. Sarah's voice grew softer. That's what this work is really about. It's not just about catching criminals. It's about giving families the truth, about honoring victims, about saying that every life matters, every victim deserves justice, no matter how much time passes. After the presentation, Sarah walked through the station hallways lined with photographs of solved cold cases. Catherine Walsh's photo held a place of honor. Beneath it, a small plaque, Catherine and Walsh, 1944 to 1961. Justice served, 2024. Agent Patricia Chun was waiting in Sarah's office. The FBI agent had become a close friend over the years. They'd worked a dozen cold cases together since Catherine Walsh, solving 6 of them. "Ready for today?" Chun asked. Sarah nodded, picking up a folder from her desk. "Ready." They drove to West Hartford, to a small community center where the Catherine Walsh Memorial Scholarship Fund was hosting its 3rd annual ceremony. The fund, established by anonymous donors after the trial, provided full college scholarships to young women studying education. Inside, the room was filled with current and former scholarship recipients. Young women who'd been given opportunities Catherine never had. Teachers, professors, counselors, all carrying forward the dream Catherine had died pursuing. Sarah and Chun took seats near the back. On stage, a young woman named Jennifer Chun, no relation to Patricia, stepped up to the microphone. Jennifer was 21, a senior at Central Connecticut State University, the same school Catherine had been accepted to in 1961. "I never knew Catherine Walsh," Jennifer began, her voice clear and confident. "But her story changed my life. I grew up in Hartford, in a neighborhood where college seemed impossible. My family couldn't afford it. I'd almost given up on my dream of becoming a teacher. Then I received the Catherine Walsh Scholarship." She held up her acceptance letter. "Next month, I graduate with honors. In the fall, I start teaching 4th grade at Bulkeley Elementary, the same school district Catherine would have taught in. Every day, I'll think about her. Every student I inspire, every life I touch, will be part of her legacy." Thomas Brennan tried to erase her from the world, but he failed. Catherine Walsh lives on through every one of us. The room erupted in applause. Sarah wiped her eyes. This was what justice really looked like. Not just a conviction, not just a sentence, but a ripple effect of goodness spreading across decades. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached Sarah. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and kind. "You don't know me, but I'm Ruth Goldstein. I testified at the trial. I was Catherine's best friend." Sarah stood and embraced her. "Mrs. Goldstein, thank you for your testimony. It was crucial." Ruth smiled sadly. "I've carried guilt for 63 years. Guilt that I didn't do more to protect her. Guilt that I didn't take Tommy Brennan's threats seriously. But seeing these young women, seeing Catherine's dream living on, it helps. She would have loved this. She would have," Sarah agreed. You honored her by telling the truth. That took courage. Ruth pulled out an old photograph from her purse. This was taken 2 weeks before Catherine died. It's the last photo of us together. I want you to have it. The photograph showed 2 teenage girls, arms around each other, laughing at something off camera. Catherine looked radiant, full of life and dreams. Sarah's chest tightened. I'll treasure this. Thank you. That evening, Sarah visited the cemetery one last time. Catherine's grave was covered in flowers from the scholarship ceremony. Someone had left a teaching certificate, a symbolic gift recognizing what Catherine should have become. Sarah knelt and placed Ruth's photograph against the headstone, protected in a waterproof frame. Look at you, Catherine. Still changing lives. Still making a difference. Thomas Brennan thought he could erase you. Instead, you've become eternal. She stayed until the stars came out, thinking about all the cases still waiting in filing cabinets back at the station. All the victims still waiting for justice. All the families still waiting for answers. Her phone buzzed. Agent Chen. Got a hit on that 1973 case. DNA match from genealogical database. When can you start working it? Sarah smiled. Tomorrow morning. First thing. Because the work never ended. There would always be another Catherine Walsh. Another family waiting for closure. Another chance to prove that justice, no matter how delayed, was always worth pursuing. 5 years after sentencing, April 2029, the Hartford Courant ran a special feature on the 5th anniversary of Thomas Brennan's conviction. The article, written by investigative journalist Maria Santos, examined the lasting impact of the case.